It's the AskJP podcast with jpmorrell. Now, let's start the show. Here's JP.
Welcome to the AskJP podcast with my co-host Monet. Today, we are going to have a very interesting and wide-ranging conversation with our special guest, who will be introduced by Monet.
Yes, we have local and nationally acclaimed author. He has written hits like Tinderbox. His new book is called American Scare. We have Bobby Fieseler on the pod.
Hi, happy to be here, guys.
It's right here.
Yay!
The stuff's right here.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming, Bobby.
Of course. I'm excited.
This is going to be our Pride Edition episode.
I was not told that this was the Pride edition, so I'm not wearing my Pride apparel. But I just want
That's
to know
appropriate.
that I'm wearing it in spirit.
Good. And Pride is about where two or more allies or queer folk are gathered. There is pride. There is pride.
It's like a minion almost, as long as you have a certain amount of people.
Right.
So we have a lot of things to cover. I think first, obviously, our relationship with Bobby began with the Upstairs Lounge and dealing with trying to actually, as a city, accept and grapple with the fact of what happened at Upstairs Lounge and the city taking accountability for it. So maybe, Bobby, since you are the expert on Upstairs Lounge, you can give us an overview of kind of what happened there and why it's important.
Okay. So the Upstairs Lounge fire is probably one of the seminal events in queer New Orleans history, or New Orleans history in general, and also queer Southern history. It's a notoriously unsolved arson fire that took place at a gay bar called the Upstairs Lounge on the ragtag fringes of the French Quarter in the early 1970s, 1973, actually, and it claimed 32 lives. It was the deadliest fire on record in New Orleans history and the worst mass killing of homosexuals in U.S. history until the 2016 massacre at Pulse. It was this major event on the map of queer Americana. Yet it received just a few days of media attention in its time due to rampant anti-gay sentiment, bigotry, discomfort, whatever you want to call it. And it was by all ostensive accounts, a solvable crime where there was a chief suspect who was neither questioned nor arrested by the NOPD. And because the fire involved a community that was considered very controversial at the time, the homosexual community in the 1970s, this solvable crime was allowed to drift off, treated as a political hot potato, and then declared an unsolved crime. So the Upstairs Lounge fire remains this historic mystery, unfortunately, because of how badly the city handled it in its moment.
Right, and just for Money I'll say, because I know she's got a lot, but it's just, I want to kind of highlight that it's not really a mystery.
No.
Yeah,
correct.
So it's not an unsolved mystery. It was a purposely unsolved crime.
Correct.
I was going to say, I remember reading in your book that at one point, I believe the bartender grabbed the suspect and brought him to a cop.
Right.
And was like, this is the guy who just burned down my bar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the cop said, go away.
Move along
Some kind of
here,
expletive.
et cetera, yeah. And in another instance, the Louisiana Office of State Fire Marshal was investigating this too because it was an arson, and the fire marshal and the NOPD were not getting along. They actually worked at odds and competed with each other. At one point, the fire marshal brought the suspect to NOPD headquarters to be interrogated and polygraphed, and the NOPD refused to even acknowledge that he was in their building and in the presence at one point. So there are more than a lot of suspicious missed moments. This was an era where a crime like this that involved a community that was considered negligible, sadly at the time, was allowed to be brushed under. And now it's taken on a life of its own in terms of legacy and historic memory, where you probably can't talk about any event that happened in gay New Orleans or queer New Orleans without finding some dotted line or direct relation to the Upstairs Lounge fire and its memory. Most everyone I talk to, I interview, will pause at one point and say, I lived in town then. I remembered when it happened. Here's exactly what was going on. They talk about it almost like There are moments in a life that are markers for people where they remember where they were on 9/11. They remember what my dad remembers where he was when during the Kennedy assassination. If you were a closeted queer person or out in an underground capacity in New Orleans at that time, you remember that fire. You remember people that were affected by it. You also remember psychologically what happened to you and what made you wonder, if that happened to me, is this how people would treat me?
Well, I think that was one of the, so we, as you know, with your help, we did the official city apology in 2022. And one thing that came out of that was super interesting. Well, a couple of things. The first was how many of the tremendous, important, organized, pro-queer organizations can literally trace their lineage back to the upstairs lounge fire. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, if you look at some of the most notable ones, like Forum for Equality Today, they can literally trace their lineage back through multiple organizations that all spun out of the activism that happened after that fire. But to your point, when we heard from those people, heard from the whole community during that apology, how many people, to your point, were like, if you thought coming out of the closet was dangerous at that time, Upstairs Lounge confirmed it. So there are people who not only didn't come out, they went further into the closet because they were afraid of the repercussions. Because if you're someone who is homophobic, who has violent tendencies, and you saw the NOPD fail to purposely investigate a mass killing, it almost became like carte blanche that if you felt like, as a gay person in New Orleans, that you had to fear for your life, you had the NOPD confirm it. Saying that if someone comes and kills me, it will go unconfirmed.
And the media confirmed it as well. Yeah, media was a huge part of it.
It became like a person-to-person sort of story passed on among anti-gay folk around the state, too. So there's consistent stories of kids of that era who were teenagers who were coming out to their parents, or at the moment they came out, the parent would respond. This was almost like a catchphrase, but a negative one. They'd say, you're going to burn like those queers in the quarter. And what they meant was they were referencing the Upstairs Lounge fire and the recollection of it, thinking this is what happens to people like that. And you're right, it took activism in New Orleans a few more years than in many other cities to get going. It was the late 70s by the time it really got going, from lesbian activist Charlene Snyder, whose bar is just a few feet away from us. Yeah, that footprint of us. And then by then, when Anita Bryant came to town in 77, 78, man, the activists kicked the door open to visibility. It's like they were ready. They were sick of this silence. And they were raring to go. And then when they started holding some of the first major gay rights, lesbian rights protests, they picked up and were using some of the same phrases you'd see at Pride Parade marches in other cities or outside Stonewall. It was out of the closets into the streets, all sorts of stuff like that. So a lot of the later not just visibility, but this sort of level of radicalization and verve and excitement that came out of queer politics came from, it was like, these are like from the scorched seeds of this terrible tragedy that they all reference in the past.
And you just did an article in 64 Parishes, I believe, about one of the organizers. We're your biggest fan, Bobby. I don't know if you know about this.
I love it.
But the article you just did, the name of the man escapes me, but one of the main organizers for the Anita Bryant.
Oh, Skip Thibodeau.
Yes. That was a fascinating work.
Yeah. So and the wonderful thing about doing queer history in New Orleans is that the stories are just growing on the trees, ripe, waiting to be plucked. There's these amazing, incredible stories of just that encapsulate almost the whole of human experience. And so the anti-Anita Bryant rally in the late 1970s in New Orleans was organized by this guy named Skip Thibodeau, who was organizing it using a gay alias name. His legal name was actually Patrick Saladino, but the gay name allowed him visibility to be this for a time the most public gay man in New Orleans at that time. He led this massive, huge rally at Jackson Square. Several thousand gay folk and allies gathered. Then they rallied there. They marched through the quarter to the municipal auditorium to protest the presence of the anti-homosexual singer Anita Bryant. And then what else was significant in Skip Kibito's life is he in the midst of the AIDS crisis, he contracted the disease and he became the first most visible gay New Orleanian to be identified as PWA in the 1980s. This was a big deal to identify. A lot of people who contracted HIV were double closeted. They didn't want to know, oftentimes have the public know that they were gay. They certainly didn't want their HIV status to be known. Skip Kibito went on the record with the major gay New Orleans newspaper at the time, Impact, saying, "No, I am a person with AIDS. I am PWA." And that was a huge deal for its era.
That's amazing. I mean, I know we touched on Charlene's. Do you want to talk more?
Yes. One of my favorite little tidbits from Charlene's, another 64 Parishes article.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I love No, but I love it because I've talked to my friend about this extensively, about how not only gay bars are kind of dwindling in population throughout the country, but lesbian bars significantly have just been very underrepresented. And I went to a lesbian bar in Nashville recently called the Lipstick Lounge, and I was like, I need to learn more about lesbian bars.
How was it?
Oh, it was fabulous. There was karaoke. It was amazing. Velvet curtains. It was a lovely little place.
Yes.
But what I loved about your story about Charlene was the softball game that the NOPD and the gay community would have with each other. And Lambert Boissier was a pitcher, I believe.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Early, who was a New Orleans city councilman. Yeah, they in the early 1980s, this is pre-AIDS stigma too. There was a sort of moment where the gay community was actively performing outreach with the NOPD, and the NOPD was responsive. So there would be a yearly competitive softball game, Blue versus Gay, they'd call it, and it was sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, and then the umpires would be New Orleans City Council members. Boissier was one of them. They did this for 2 years, and then there'd be fundraisers to buy bulletproof vests for police officers. There was a concerted effort on the part of the early New Orleans gay political infrastructure to make the police force more our friends. And then that was the first time that the NOPD agreed that they would accept training for how to work with the New Orleans gay community, how to handle the phenomenon of crimes within the gay community without persecuting everyone you're talking to. And all those steps were sort of accomplished in that early moment before the incredible epidemic set in that kind of created an all bets are off situation where a lot of people politically didn't know how to respond or how to work with the community in the midst of it. And people forget about the epidemic. But that was that moment, which I find amazing. I can just, can you picture this? Right. I want to go in a time capsule to go to the Blue versus Gay 1980 softball game. And who convinced Anheuser-Busch to sponsor? It was corporate.
Bud Light sponsoring a Blue versus Gay softball team.
If only conservative media knew that when they were blasting them over having a trans podcaster that they were sponsoring, they were on the forefront.
They were.
On the forefront of being, I mean, it's just the peaks and valleys of corporate America with both the Black community, the gay community, every marginalized group is that it's funny because like I'll have conversations where people are like, why is everyone picketing Target but not Walmart? And once I was talking to someone who's like, I mean, how do you justify that as a Black man? You go into Walmart but you're not going to Target. It's like, well, Walmart's kind of always been terrible. Target pretended to be different.
Right.
And I mean, it's hard to say that like out loud, but like that's when you realize that corporations, I mean, we all know they do this, but like Target was the most egregious actor. They were like, we're pro pride, we're pro everything.
Correct.
And the moment they got some pushback, they just turn it off. It's like the betrayal there is worse than like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has always been this way. They wear that on their shoulder. They have never had a here's our non-homophobic chicken sandwich.
Correct.
But
they've never presented as a haven for gays.
No. Yeah. So the reason why people so viscerally respond to a Target is because they pretended that they gave a shit.
I mean, this is a Target Pride dress right here. I got this on the Pride collection.
Right. Like they pretended. And when you realize someone's literally manipulating you for profit, and the moment that their manipulation hurts their bottom line, they revert back to what it is. it's a whole different level. I mean, corporations are corporations, but when you build an identity for over a very robust period of time. I remember when I was in college, they were Target. Everyone's like, go to Target.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because they were the hip, cool, inclusive store. And the moment they got a little pushback, they just flipped that switch. You're like, you guys were never a friend. You were there to take my cash, pretend you gave a shit about my community. And the moment that you thought it could impact your bottom line, you're worse than the people that just hate us.
They'll be back when the sun's shining again.
Yeah.
Certainly.
It will be. And I think, honestly, you see it right now. You see them already kind of making like tepid efforts, but I don't know. I mean, my family wrote off Target, and I don't ever see it going back there to do some stuff. Just because you're like, I mean, to your point, they'll be back when the pendulum swings back that way, but fool me once, like.
Correct.
I mean, it's just. Sorry for the weird tangent, but when you talk about Bush and how quickly talk about Bud Light, you talk about what happened with their efforts to do outreach and how quickly they yanked it back.
Right.
It's so interesting because when you look at what's happened in corporate America with like the Costco's of the world, the few companies that said, you know what, DEI works, we're going to stick with it. And how it's affected their bottom line in a positive way. You would think most of corporate America would look at just the dollars and cents, but it's just very disappointing that they kind of just follow the trends in the worst possible way.
The number of companies, publicly traded oftentimes, that had been up until maybe just like, let's say 14 months ago, really devoted to a diverse spend, and there's even in their supply chain, that have sort of allowed that to evaporate. It's quite shocking. The economic fallout is nuts. It's not a new betrayal. I mean, there are very few values-based, large, publicly traded companies. They're there to increase shareholder value. They're Machiavellian. And they paint a nice face on things where we can get excited going to Target and you see the Pride cereal that they're stocking that year, where Tony the Tiger is hugging Toucan Sam, and you're like, oh my gosh! But then you better believe this year I'm not going to see Tony the Tiger hugging Toucan Sam.
No.
Well, I mean, you won't find Tony Tiger at all because the shelves will be empty because we have no food. But I mean, but let's talk a little bit about your new book, American Scare, because I think that it's important. I know that a lot of us learned what we know about the upstairs lounge fire from your previous book, and I think it's important for the public to kind of hear like what you're working on right now, and that's important.
So this is my new book. I've been working on it for 7 years, and it's finally coming out. It was this very long gestation process because I always need a challenge, and the challenge I wanted to take on was, can I tell a fully censored history, number one, and can I tell a story that will help me feel less disoriented in our American moment, where I felt like the past was offering me very few clues. I thought I understood American history, where the chart of things was going to go up to 2015, and then suddenly the 21st century took a turn I did not anticipate. And why did that happen? And I thought it happened because there must be something significant in our past that has been denied to us as fundamental contextual knowledge that would point to a certain other aspect of the American character that would show about how we've gotten to our current moment. So I dug into the past, and I thought a big clue of where this is going to be is this concept I'm calling Floridization, which is how did Florida politics become so darn important? How did it become national politics post-2000? How did it become the thing? Where I'm thinking about Tallahassee politics as some of the most brutal, disgusting breed of politics ever been created in our national history, and it's come to define D.C. in this current moment that we live in. For example, the Attorney General of the state of Florida is our current Attorney General, our current Secretary of State, former Florida Senator. We can go on and on about the connections, but I found it. I thought, is it Anita Bryant? Is it stuff that happened with anti-homosexual stuff in the past? No, it was further. I had to go all the way back to the Red Scare, and I found this moment, this largely forgotten purge that for Inquisition that for 9 years from 1956 to 1964 held residents of the state of Florida ransom to this extrajudicial committee that had the power to declare anyone it wanted to, black integrationists, closeted queer teachers, if you were just a Cuban walking down the street, enemies of the people. It was the most one of some of the most egregious examples of civil rights violations I could ever think of. But it was run by this committee was run by this segregationist, racist, Dixiecrat guy who'd gotten kicked out of the governor's mansion named Charlie Johns. He was a state senator. And what his committee perpetrated in its day became so notorious in the state of Florida that they called it the Johns Committee. They gave it after his nickname. They had the power to, they usurped all the powers of the three branches of Florida government, basically. And they, even though they were a legislative branch, they could do prosecutorial, executive work. They could also do stuff at the judicial branch. They could kidnap you and abduct you out of public or private places. They could take you to interrogate you in basement settings for as long as they wanted without a lawyer, get you to confess to something that you didn't do. They could edit your transcript and testimony. They could hold you in contempt for any reason they wanted and jail you on reason of contempt. They could go through your medical records. They could go through your mental health records at this time to accomplish whatever they want. This is a true story of American tyranny that planted the seeds, right? I think of political poison so deeply, it continues to affect our country now in terms of the style.
Is this pre-McCarthy or during McCarthy?
This is just post-McCarthy. This is just post-McCarthy.
Crazy.
People don't know that the Red Scare, after the federal stuff, the worst of the federal atrocities, gained a second life that was even more powerful in the southern states among segregationists that would have done anything, brought the world down to just get another year of white power and white rule. And they used the term communist as unscientifically as you could to call anyone they didn't like that was against the white system, right? The enemy of the state. They would call it a subversive. So like if you were a subversive, basically the worst, all of the arm of the law, all the power of the state could be thrust against you as an individual. And this true story of American tyranny, people need to know. And the reason they don't know it is because when the Johns Committee shut down in 1965, basically they brought down the old state of Florida Constitution. The whole form of government in the state had to be rebuilt from the ground up with a new constitution in the 60s because for this and all sorts of other reasons, and just to kick the Dixiecrats out basically and allow integration to occur in the state. And then they sealed the records away so that no one could see it until the 1990s. And then when they released the records in the 90s, they redacted the names of all the victims on the originals so that no one could see who was hurt in these isolated rooms, in these hearings where they're being made to confess to things they didn't do, etc. And I spent 6 years decensoring all that material. I went out, I got the transcripts, I found censorship mistakes, I had a magnifying glass like Sherlock Holmes, and I figured out who did what and what happened, and who was the victim, and who were the informants. And I want people to know this story.
Bobby, I mean, it's somewhat similar to the Tulsa massacre, where basically you had an entire state choose to selectively forget that a horrific thing happened. And working in concert with the media, they literally, jokes aside, but like people didn't realize that the Tulsa massacre was a mainstream thing until it came up in the Watchmen TV show.
That's totally true.
And and then as we'll start digging, it was like, to your point, that came out, I want to say around the 90s or late 90s, that Oklahoma had to acknowledge it occurred.
Correct.
And start to reveal the documentation. It makes you wonder, when you look across the entire southern United States and you go from state to state, to your point, how many of these atrocities occurred? How many were buried? And when you don't address those atrocities in real time, when you allow them to become kind of like a generational memory, how does that lay the groundwork for the future bad actors
Sure.
build off of it. Because, I mean, when you look at what you're describing, what happened in Tallahassee during that time period, and you look at Florida today, it's like 2.0.
Sure.
It's a more public facing, it's got a fresh coat of paint, and they are. I was watching John Oliver, this is going to come back, and he was talking about the American Alliance for Defending Freedom.
Oh, I saw that episode, yeah.
And you look at, for those of you who don't know, you should watch John Oliver all the time, but he talked about the Alliance for Defending Freedom, which is like this nonprofit organization that exists to basically target primarily the gay and trans community and basically try to force Supreme Court decisions to undermine the rights of the gay community. And one of the things which stuck with me in this conversation, he talked about how he's playing their own videos and how one of their things they brag about is they talk about how you have to make things fun and make it a veneer of it all being polite so that people will listen to you. So you have a horrific position, but if you make it whimsical, if you make the whole conversation whimsical, people will listen. And when you look at the Florida of today and how the goal and the outcome is similar to the Johns Committee. It's just that they use TikTok, they use social media, they use like kind of made up problems to try and make people feel righteous in their bigotry. It's very similar to the Alliance's kind of thing of, let's take this. It wasn't that the goal was wrong in targeting the gay community. It's that we presented it in an unsympathetic way that was that we could easily be vilified.
Right.
And you look at like the new faces, the new messaging, it's just really sinister what's happening. And when you bury history, when you bury that's happened before, it allows them to act like that these crises that they manufactured are new. These are the talking points, all the stuff they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
It's old. They're just putting a new coat of paint on it.
Correct. I mean, first of all, what you're saying is I absolutely agree with. There are fundamental planks of the American past that have been denied to the public that offer significant context for understanding not just this American moment, but basically what this country is. And within these hidden histories, there are amazing tales of individuals who stood up to various inquisitions or injustices and accomplished things that makes you actually quite proud to be an American, and we've been denied these opportunities to feel that kind of patriotism. But to speak to what you're saying about about Tallahassee politics, so like yes, the rules that were sort of created by Charlie Johns, who is a former acting governor. He inherited it from a sick man, and then he could only keep it for a year and a half before they kicked him out of office. Turned state senator. Was Charlie Johns was a chummy guy. If you met him, he was like a combination of Mitch McConnell's parliamentary tricks, George W. Bush's glad-handing and ability and memory in a room, plus a little bit more of Bill Clinton's charm, 92 Bill Clinton's charm. So this was a guy who Charlie Johns had an elephantine memory, could remember anyone upon first introduction, their wife, where they're from, children, all of the political tricks, to the point where you or I might be fooled in a room with him. He was so skilled at this. One of Charlie Johns' main political enemies in the legislature at the time he's on the record with this funny quote. He says, Charlie Johns is the most likable man I have ever met. I have to remind myself that I hate him. So he utilized a lot of it in his era, a lot of these charming skills about how do you make a despicable thing fun, relatable, polite? How do you make it seem winsome? Something that maybe weak-willed or weak confidence, men with weak confidence might want to grab onto as part of a movement or as part of an ideology. And his breed of politics was stuff you'll see today, not just in Florida, elsewhere, but spoils and personal enrichment, huge into spoils, politics of revenge, no grudge left unaddressed, electoral manipulation, terrible gerrymandering, and also how do I find loopholes in constitutions, norms, rules, so that I can crown myself king of a land. You abuse an office fundamentally when you find most people can, now that they understand it, that you can find little mechanisms that were unplanned for when founding documents were written, when laws were written. And oftentimes what I view as the fundamental abuse of an office holder is if you use your office to become way bigger than your office was ever intended to be. And basically Charlie Johns used the Red Scare, used loopholes within an 1885 Florida Constitution that he knew like the back of his hand to basically crown himself king of Florida, bigger than the governor.
But I think what's super interesting to your point when you're talking about like concealed history is that the number one thing, and I know people are listening to those of you who actually listen to podcasts, especially ones on topics like this, obtuse, but people are so disheartened, and it's absolutely intentionally by people who are manipulating government now that the apparent efforts to take over government for the sakes of people who are bigots in the minority is a new thing and inevitable. And the reality is that part of why they bury this history is because people have done the same things that people like DeSantis and Trump are trying to do in the past and have been thwarted. So part of burying the history is not just it's embarrassing. They also don't want you to know they failed.
Correct.
Like they don't want to know that. I mean, to your point with this Johns character who sounds like pretty much the devil. I mean, like literally the charismatic devil, but they not only don't want you to know what he did, they don't want you to know how people beat him. Because if that were part of the history, then you go, you know what? What DeSantis is doing in Florida, someone did do this, and people who organized and who were on top of it, who risked their lives, they succeeded. They don't just want you to know that this horrible thing happened. They want you to know that it was. They don't want you to know how to beat it. So, reading books like this, they give you that. They give you that perspective of this feels like the darkest time, but there have been lots of instances in the past where it's been the darkest time, and people who stood up and fought, they won.
Correct.
I'm going to have to look this up. I've got a great Lord of the Wings line that I'm totally going to bottle. So when it's off.
So one guy I want people to know as sort of a hero of this story who helped bring down Charlie Johns and the Johns Committee was a historic figure I'd never heard of, which was a gay black man named William James Neal, who was a junior college professor in Pinellas County, which is like right by St. Pete, Tampa. And he was brought into a room by his white boss, interrogated on suspicion of a gay crime. And after being held for 3.5 hours, he got out of the room by confessing to something that was impossible, being in a city he wasn't in, doing something with a man who didn't exist. So anyway, he was fired, his teaching credentials were pulled, and he was pilloried, lambasted. His reputation was ruined because it was all reported in state media. And then this man did this black gay man in the segregated South did what no one other teacher or professor had done up to that point. He sued the state of Florida and their own court system. He hid his race by leaving the state. He hired a team of white lawyers. In every legal document, basically, there's no mention of his race. It was all exclusively about the policy that led to his firing as a teacher. And he won in Florida Supreme Court in 1962 as a gay black man. Nobody knows about this guy. He was a Korean War veteran. The state of Florida had to give his teaching certificate back to him. He took it and he went to Maryland and he worked for the rest of his life in public schools there till he retired. And then he died peacefully in his own bed. And the only clue that I have that he was loved in his own life and that he found peace in Maryland is that the epitaph on his grave says "beloved friend." But I want people to know more about. There are people like William James Neal who did stuff in the segregated South. And can you imagine? I mean, like, as a gay black man to defeat the Florida justice system, which was rigged to protect whites at their own game by being able to hide his own race, and he won for a gay issue? It's crazy. No one thinks that stuff happens in the past. And that's because these victories, knowledge of these victories are not useful to the opposition that wants you to think that, the forces of white dominion elite always win when they rig a society.
No, I mean, it is very intentional. I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, we who are in policy know this. Textbooks are written every textbook in this country is written for the largest markets that purchase textbooks. So textbooks are literally dictated by the states of Texas, by the states of Florida. And so when you see this effort throughout the South to try and tell textbook manufacturers which histories they're allowed to include or exclude, these are not benign issues. I mean, you're told by, I've sat in legislative committee hearings where people go, well, I don't want my kids to know the hard truths of history. I don't want to ruin their little minds by talking about making them feel bad because at some point, well, some people owned other people. And it's like, that is the whimsy. That is I'm trying to appeal to you as a parent. I don't want to make my kids sad. But the reality is they're trying to rewrite history.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to rewrite history so that the hard truths, the things that happened that kids need to know to not repeat it, they pretend like they're doing it for their mental health, and they're doing it because they want to hide the things that have happened in history. But when you look at where democracy emerged organically in this country, in the world, it's because it's like when we toppled Russia, people would like to think that we toppled Russia because we outspent them and had more military might. And it was a combination of Beatles, blues, and all these things that people saw what Western Europe had. They saw what Americans enjoyed. They saw the freedom. They saw those things that were right out of their reach, and they aspired and got there. And it's such a disservice to our country, all that's happening right now. To your point, I am a huge, y'all know this, I'm a huge, complete comic book nerd. And I get in these huge arguments with people all the time because they take their ideas of what America is and they kind of lay it over things. If people really looked at how, I'm going to do a shout out to my daughter Fiona right now because I really love Fiona. Yeah, I love Fiona, but she gave me the real history of Captain America. And I'm going to tell you this because I think it's important for y'all to know this. So when two Jewish men created Captain America, the cover of the first comic was him punching Adolf Hitler. At the time, Pearl Harbor had not happened. America had not entered World War II. And those two publishers, those two authors, they had death threats constantly because America was sympathetic, particularly in New York, to Nazis. So the mayor of New York had to assign bodyguards to them to do the comic. Now, what happened was eventually America did enter the war. Eventually, America did overthrow Hitler. But the real history was they were ahead of the curve, and so was Captain America. If you look over the history of the character, he has repeatedly challenged the idea of patriotism because patriotism is not blindly following the government. Patriotism is not blindly adhering to this idea of American nostalgia that we have an infallible country that is always right. Patriotism is saying, I'm proud to be an American, warts and all. Saying that I'm proud of the country we have today that began as something but has evolved into something else. And I say that because when you look at kind of things that MAGA folk adopt, they adopt things like Captain America or the Punisher, these characters, and put the stickers in the back of their car. And they've never read the comic because the position of these characters and a variety of different things and the people that create them, they are so dramatic. Think about how many anti-Semitic people are huge blonde-haired, blue-eyed Captain America fans, and he was created by two Jews.
Yeah.
It's just like it's just to your point. Like history is fascinating because there are people who just fundamentally don't understand history and make it their life school for people to not learn it. And it's just, I don't know. This book is tremendously important, especially for people, I think, who have kind of lost heart because they think that what we have now is insurmountable. And what you're describing in your book, Bobby, is that, no, it's surmountable and people have surmounted it.
Yes. And I try to end the book, basically information recovery is a powerful thing and an emotional thing for a writer to do. And it's a kind of history that involves basically needle haystacking, digging stuff out, and then restoring it to people, saying that you deserve to know this story. You deserve to know this aspect of the American past. And so I go in depth to talk about how I was able to do that. Basically, there was in Tallahassee, there was a paralegal who had formerly been a master's degree student at University of South Florida who wrote the first master's thesis in the 80s on the Johns Committee, who had somehow gained access to the secret second set of Johns Committee records. And she let me know as I was writing this book that she had them. No one knew she had these 30 bankers boxes that she'd moved from multiple places. She says, I want to give them to you right now. And she told me that right as Hurricane Ida was about to hit. So I had to navigate the storm with going to Tallahassee. And then I brought these books. I had to get, as soon as I found out that these boxes, as soon as I found out they existed, I knew I had to get them the hell out of the state.
Right.
And I brought them into New Orleans, and it was in New Orleans here, sort of in the freedom of this context and what the city offers creatively, that I was able to sort of find a way to unlock a lot of the codes that they had used to create the censor stuff. And the book ends with basically me walking out in New Orleans. And the thought I had that I think is, I want to share that I think is probably the most positive spin and thought I could put on information recovery is I said, the greatest, and I wrote this at 2 a.m. When I was so exhausted, I said, perhaps the greatest liberty in any country is the freedom to know one's country. Mm. And then my next line is, I felt truly free. I think the gift of being a citizen of the United States is we exist in a country that invites you to know it as a citizen. There are so many regimes that deny you fundamental information about the story of however the hell the power structure built up around you. They want you to think that it just existed there forever, basically divine right, whatever they want to say. And the ability to know the American story, when you truly know it, has a way of, I find, consistently and always making you proud. And that is one of the greatest freedoms of this country. And I hope there is more decensorship and more digging up of lost pasts, because people need to know them.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this concept of like reclamation recently in terms of, well, we just had our new pope, and I grew up Catholic, but I consider myself little c Catholic, culturally Catholic. And I've, in, this like frenzy of the pope, I'm thinking about Catholicism and how, not to get all religious, but I feel like Catholicism at its core is truly radical acceptance, radical toleration, treat others how you would like to be treated. It's none of this, like, we don't believe in gay marriage, we don't believe in IVF. That's so far removed from like what the core of the religion is about. And I think as Catholics, but also as Americans, we need to reclaim what it means to be Catholic, what it means to be American. And, this version of Catholicism or patriotism that you put out there is bullshit. And when you go back to our core values, they don't match. And so it's like, be trans and be Catholic, be liberal and be a patriot. Like, these two things can coexist. And anyone that tells you otherwise is lying.
That's so profound, because remember, it's something you see every day when you have, like, I remember I had a very good friend of mine in law school who had a pride flag on their car next to an American flag, and they would get stopped by people saying, take that American flag off. You does represent American values. And that is, to Monet's point, that is a very coherent, there is an effort by people in this country to claim things as theirs exclusively. Like, the American flag belongs to patriots, and in order to be considered a patriot, you have to agree with everything I believe. And if you don't, I get to determine what a patriot is. When you look at kind of like some of the most sensational, and I'll say this much, and then this will give me a little flaming from the left. It's the same thing with progressives. Progressives will say, if you don't believe 100% of what I believe is progressive, then you are a conservative MAGA nut.
Yeah, there is orthodoxy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is prevalent throughout the country. And the reality is that you need to do, as a person, what you think is best, what you think is correct, what you think is moral, what you think is patriotic. And don't let anyone define who you are because of their interpretation of terminology. I have a tremendous amount of friends that I have made throughout my life that are either progressive heterosexuals or conservative, queer people. And the two things can coexist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do give a little pushback sometimes when I'll see somebody carrying a book that is contradictory to whatever they say they believe. But for the most part, those things can coexist. But people really should not allow, whether it's the media, whether it's your family, to define what you are, who you are, based upon their own values. Because to your point, Monet, I mean, I know lots of people who are gay Catholics.
Yeah.
And they're like, their family's like, well, if you choose to go out the closet, you can't be a Catholic anymore. And we're like, who says that? Like the church, and I mean, this is really going to get me slayed by this. Like, the church isn't owned by anyone.
Exactly.
Christianity isn't owned by anyone.
Sure.
You are a Christian and you're a gay person or you're a trans person. No one gets to tell you that because of those things, you no longer are allowed in the Christian club. It's like, I had this conversation with my son the other day. He was like, Dad, is Kanye West still a black person? And I was like, unfortunately, he is. Because I can't take his blackness away from him, despite the fact his views on everything offend every black person. If he still calls himself a black person, he's still in the tribe. I mean, it's just the tribalism that is overcoming this country, which is predominantly from the right, but is also the left. You can't let that define who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
Let's. I know we're a little long. I do want to address two quick things.
You want to talk about the plaque?
Yeah.
The unveiling.
It's all the plaque.
So, June 22nd, I believe. Well, let's rewind.
Yes.
Last year, the Upstairs Lounge plaque was installed at the site of the Upstairs Lounge, 2003?
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
30th anniversary. It took the city 30 years from the day of the tragedy to initially put the plaque down.
Okay. And in 2024, it was stolen. I told my aunt last night, and she was like, how the hell did someone steal it? Did they like pull it out of the sidewalk? I'm like, quite literally, and put it in a trash can and walked away with it, and we've never seen it again. So the community, to their credit, has fundraised to replace this plaque, which personally I have some feelings about. that.
The fact the community had to fundraise to replace it in itself is kind of offensive, but kudos to the community for stepping up to do that. So I mean, yes. Go ahead, sorry.
But right now we're at a point where the plaque was fundraised, it's created, it's ready to go down, and we've been having some issues with the city trying to get the proper permitting to put this plaque back in the ground that was already there. We're just replacing what was stolen. Do you serve on the committee?
I'm on the plaque committee.
Okay.
It's being led by my husband, Ryan Leitner. And then there is Lonnie Cheramy of the MCC. This guy, Jimmy, who represents this group that runs every year there's a commemoration, the Crescent City Leathermen. And then Frank representing the Archives Project. And then also there's a famous trans activist named Courtney Sharp who's representing the old committee group.
Oh, okay.
She knew them, who came together the first time to put this down so they could have a voice as well. And it's been the process has taken a lot less time than it did the first time, the 30 years time, to raise the amount of money. But yeah, now we're at a stage where we're navigating bureaucratic loopholes. You guys are helping us to do so. And it didn't take very long for the community to get on board in terms of fundraising, and then also in terms of messaging arrangements. That all kind of happened in a turnkey way. We're really hoping that we want to premiere the plaque again this summer on the 22nd, which will be a Sunday, such that it can serve as the sort of educational device and emotional device for a lot of people where they pass by this. The Upstairs Lounge site at random, they read the plaque, they look up, and they're suddenly transported, and they know for the first time, and they have this reaction that a lot of people have when they learn about the Upstairs Lounge story, which is, I just found out. People tend to process it very personally, so I want that. We need that to continue to happen in New Orleans, and the plaque will provide that mechanism, I think. And the new design is so gorgeous. Like I'm not a graphic designer myself, but they've been able to work into the background some of the bit of the extant Upstairs Lounge photography of what the last remaining photograph of the Upstairs Lounge regulars together when they were having fun. We're including that there, and I think it's just going to be a testament of just one of the great, beautiful, supportive things that this city is able to accomplish if the things standing in the way of that moment step aside, please.
So we can confirm that the permit for the committee to install themselves has been approved. So hopefully you'll have that permit by the end of this week.
Heck yeah.
Time of filming.
We are engaged, and I would say that we are at the point where we're literally standing on the neck of city government trying to get it done. And so it's so frustrating because for me, when we found out about the theft, it was really kind of a desecration of something that was very, very important and very just of such significant cultural significance to the city that for me, putting this new plaque in is like reconsecrating holy ground. You know what I mean? After you have something that's terrible that's happened to a place, you have to kind of reinvest and remake it and really make people feel safe that this place is back to what it was and what that plaque represents to the community. What purpose to all of New Orleans? I mean, I'm often, when I think about Upstairs Lounge, I think about, you may recall this, during the apology we had the city council do, we had Clancy Dubose come up as Clancy is older, but he was a young strapping reporter.
Yes.
And his direct testimony as to the way the media portrayed it and how you could see the efforts of people to downplay the horrific tragedy he witnessed and kind of how, as a reporter at the time, he dealt with kind of what was going on. Mm-hmm. The fact that this happened, the fact that you've had all these different struggles with the bureaucracy to get it done, the lack of urgency in kind of doing it, it makes it sting a little bit when you're trying to get that plaque back on the ground, you know? From my perspective, which is why Monet has led in my office in making sure we get that resolved. But I mean, you hear these stories and you're like, I mean, you guys paid for the plaque. Why is it so hard to install a plaque?
Correct.
And fix something? It's just,
that was already there.
It was already
there. That's what it's made.
It's about, I'm so excited about getting this. I'm so excited to see the new plaque. I'm so excited for what it means for the community and for the city, because I know we've talked about American Scare, but Tinderbox was just as important because the Upstairs Lounge is also kind of a hidden history. I mean, like you said, for a lot of people in this city, especially people in the queer community, new people in the community don't know about the Upstairs Lounge. Mm-hmm. And I mean, as they learn about it, the people I've spoken to, it really creates a sense of pride in that this community not only survived the horrific Upstairs Lounge fire, not only survived the efforts by people in power to bury that it happened or the tragedy that it was, but that so many groups that we care about and know about were born out of the tragedy. I mean, it goes to your point. You don't want to have this history buried because it helps spur on people to continue fighting when they know people have built such tremendous things out of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So kind of, bookending this episode here, we were talking before we started filming, Bobby, about, I don't know, when did you publish the Tinderbox? 2018?
2018, yeah.
Okay, I'm on my dates today.
You're good.
So what has it been like since these past 7 years, and how the legacy and how you kind of found yourself as kind of like a caretaker of this memory, and how does that, as a historian, and a writer, how does that,
It was overwhelming at first. I thought I was just writing a book about something people needed to know about. Then this sort of history caught on in a way that was very inspiring. And then eventually I came to accept that this was part of the mission of my life. And it's a gift to have a mission in your life. Mm-hmm. Many people don't have them. So this is something, making sure that people know about the Upstairs Lounge, that they hear the Upstairs Lounge story and they're affected in the way that the Upstairs Lounge story does for people, which it takes this side door into the human heart, and it can honestly change minds. I've seen it happen with people where if you'd think they wouldn't want to hear any sort of queer history story, they hear the Upstairs Lounge story and suddenly they're thinking about the world in a new way.
We saw that at council chambers when you presented. Yeah.
And so these past 7 years have been a gift. I have had to, and what's really cool about this is that when you write a piece or you create a movie or you do a cool podcast series, you want it to have its run. And then they talk about sunsetting things, which I've never been able to do with this book. I still get invited to talk about the upstairs lounge all the time. But what's nice is that you want a project that sort of makes babies, where this book has attracted podcasters, has attracted documentarians, has attracted even like other people that are writing PhD dissertations, master's thesis, etc., where I know this won't be the final word on the upstairs lounge, and it makes me feel really good. So I've been at this long enough now that I'm seeing the next generation not just sprout, but kind of spread their wings and become the next group of people that takes this event on as their own. And that is probably one of the most meaningful things I've experienced in my career. That's just where like this history is growing up. It's not just on the map, but it's being taken seriously, and it's sort of is going to at some stage will totally walk away from me, and I'm totally okay with that happening, so long as the next people are telling the story.
What do you think it is about the gay community of New Orleans specifically? Like, what brought you here, and what do you think makes it so special versus other cities and their communities? Kind of a loaded question, a lot.
Yeah,
but
it's so weird here. Like, I don't know, like, you have to be, if you were New Orleans, I'm not a New Orleanian because I didn't go to high school here, right? And I wasn't born in a New Orleans hospital, but like, I am a New Orleans resident, and I do have New Orleans pride. And I don't know if my husband and I will ever leave. But we moved here almost right after the book came out. In 2018, and we kind of found a creative refuge for ourselves, and we both really took to the place, that the fact that this is an urban wonderland and an urban wilderness. It's just a wild city where there's a lot of weird stuff that you can just interact with when you leave the door, where you're just like, I can't believe this happened. I was walking to the gym the other day, and an unhoused man walked past me, eyeing me strangely, and then I saw in his opposite hand, he was holding a pair of like Ninja Turtle nunchucks. Like, he was ready to go. And I just started laughing to myself, and I'm like, this was the first 10 minutes of my day on the way to the gym, and I saw a nunchuck guy. I love this town. So like, there's so much of that I think is part and parcel of why the queer community is so talented here, is so forthright and creative. New Orleans is a city that hasn't killed its bohemia. There are emerging artists or working artists who maybe are just going to be emerging and working their whole life. Versions of making it big or success do exist, but oftentimes these are people here just to find their own communities here. And so I think that that's sort of that level of creativity is, I think, and do-it-yourselfness and stick to it. That's sort of what makes the New Orleans queer community so special, where almost as soon as I moved here, Ryan and I got involved in stuff. We're on boards for stuff. We're on committees for the upstairs lounge plaque. Do you know how many other cities that we lived in where we were even at attendees at one single meeting? None. We never gone to a city meeting at Brooklyn or like Boston. We never set down a route. New Orleans is a city that like will welcome in the stranger, and especially if you're just weird enough, you can figure out how to make your weird key in with the weird around you, and then it just ramifies.
I think I understand this, and I'm a shade tosser, so I'm going to throw some shade, but that's why New Orleans is really weird and why Austin is manufactured weird.
And I just went to Austin, and it is not weird.
It's like I was in Austin recently, and I saw these 20-somethings on scooters wearing big 80s glasses and headbands and with big giant mustaches, and I was like, these people are trying so hard to be weird. You come to New Orleans, everyone's just weird, and they're comfortable in their own skin weird. They aren't like weird, like they're aspiring to fit a weird. I mean, when you say weird in New Orleans, it's like everyone here is really weird. Like, and I mean, everyone's are different types of weird, but everyone's in. It's a community where you can come here with your own weird, and it just fits right in. There's no square pegs and circular holes. There's always a place for everyone at the weird table. So it definitely is what I believe makes New Orleans special, and you're 100% right. And our gay community here is fantastic. They are loud, they are proud, they always have been. And I will say that as someone who's been in government for, God, a very long time at this point, it makes my life easier when you have advocates who advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the legislature is the least friendly place on earth for gay people, and yet that has never stopped the advocates in our community in New Orleans from showing up and really like spitting in the face of hostile people to let them know we're here, we're not going anywhere. And I tell people all the time, when you judge the state of Louisiana and how it is on generally progressive issues, progress is glacial. But what I will tell you is that the reason why you see occasional movement is because there is constant pressure by the affected communities to never get up, continue to fight up there, and continue to push for glacial progress, because there are other states across the union where there is no progress in office, and often it goes completely in reverse very quickly. So, I mean, this is a very special place.
As we wrap up, tell us, you just published your new book, American Scare.
Yeah.
What's next?
I got a tour American Scare. So the launch event for American Scare is going to be at Octavia on June 17th. And I am so excited. Octavia has been so good to me as a working writer. They hand sold 300 copies of Tinderbox at my initial launch event, and like they're just this amazing sort of indie book refuge. I just love them. So they're hosting my launch event for American Scare, and then I'm also going to be doing a mega event with Larry Bagnaris, former member of city government, who just put a book out called Call Me Larry, and also Frank Perez has a new book out on the
Rainbow Fleur-de-Lis.
Rainbow Fleur-de-Lis, and Frank Perez is the executive director of the LGBT Archives Project. So we're going to be doing a mashup event on the 30th of June, last day of Pride, at BK House, and it's going to be wild. So that's what's slated next for me.
Put that in your calendar, folks.
Well, and I found my Lord of the Rings quote that I wanted to use, because I just think I thought of this when we're talking about American Scare and about the efforts by people in power to make you forget history and forget that the things that are happening to you and to us as a community, one, you're not alone, and this has happened before, and two, there are people who come before you that have done great things, and it's this great line, and I'm going to quote, "I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." And that's a quote that I don't want to massacre it, so I looked it up, but I think American Scare and the work Bobby does is so important because it really inspires new people to realize that these things that happen, they're all rooted in history, and knowing history is part of how you prevent it from repeating itself. So thank you, Bobby, for coming here today. We really appreciate you. We appreciate all the work you've done in the city. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I think this has been a really awesome second podcast from this location.
Yes, this location.
Which is fantastic. And
shout out to Baldwin.
Once again, shout out to Fiona for real Captain America history.
Yes.
And thank you, Bobby. Look forward to working with you in the future or whatever new thing you come up.
Yes, let's do it. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thanks so much.